Okay, so it's 1 minute past our starting time, so I will just start talking a bit here now, and I hope that we will have some more people joining during the session. And welcome very much to everybody who joined already to this session about the Baltic Sea. And I am Maria Wetterstrand. I will lead you through this session today. And I am a Swedish, I am a biologist actually by education, but I didn't really work as a biologist. So I've been focused on politics most of my life. And environmental policy making is something that's very close to my heart. And one of the issues that I used to focus quite a lot on was the different kind of policies connected to the Baltic Sea region, which is close to where I come from, also in Sweden. So that's a few words about me. And the Baltic Sea is, it's been a hot topic in Swedish politics and also in the countries around the Baltic region since at least decades, a couple of decades back, maybe 20, 30 years, because of the obvious environmental issues connected to the Baltics. And I think that it's great that today we will get a few new perspectives on this issue that can keep the debate vital and can give us also a renewed enthusiasm about continuing to work for the good of the Baltic Sea. And to do that, we have three excellent speakers that will give us some of their brilliant thoughts about the Baltics. And I will ask you first, Johanna Fox from WWF, to just let us know a little bit why you decided to organize this session today.
Thank you, Maria, and hi, everyone. So why we decided to organize this session is that today it's the Baltic Sea Day, a day where we celebrate our sea here up in the Nordics, but we also want to show the issues, celebrate the sea, but also to talk about the issues that we are facing in the Baltic and look at the future solutions. And for those of you who will join the next session here, we'll probably hear more about the history of the Baltic Sea Day, started by the John Nurminen Foundation. So it's celebrated across the Baltic, and this is one of them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We would also like to invite our participants here to give us some information about their whereabouts. So if you can help us and let us know where in the world you are right now. And me, myself, I'm in Eskilstuna, Sweden, by Lake Mälaren. It connects to the Baltic Sea in Stockholm. Usually I work in Brussels, but now I'm here in a messy living room. That's why my background is blurred in my summer house. So to let us know where you are working or where you are right now, you should go to the menti.com and use the code, and you will also have the link in the chat so that you can click the link and then you can get to our questionnaire at menti.com. So let's wait for the results here and see where people are. And Johanna, maybe while we are doing this, you can say a few words more about the Baltic region. What do you say?
Yes, Maria, we've got the nice slide here showing where people are coming from. It's good to know. A lot of people probably are from the Baltic region and know that the Baltic is a sea that has been, like Maria said, faced with a lot of issues. It's a beautiful sea. The region, the catchment area is home to around 85-90 million people. We've had a strong history of environmental stewardship, environmental awareness with the people in the region. But the sea is also facing a lot of challenges. We have problems with eutrophication, nutrient runoff from the agricultural sector, from other industries, declining fish stocks, a lot of shipping that takes place in the area. So it's a very crowded sea. And even if there are environmental policies in place, it can be quite hard to come to see the improvement in the sea at the moment. And that's also why we're here today, to talk about new ways of thinking. Maybe there's time for a change to look at other types of actors, such as financial actors, to be part of a change for a better Baltic.
That's right, Johanna. We have seen that happening in the issue of climate change, for example. We have seen financial actors taking more action, so to say. So maybe there are possibilities also for the Baltics to use this driver. Yeah, we can see here now that most people who, at least who's answered the questionnaire, they are in Sweden. We got also in the chat someone saying hi from London in the UK. So we think that our audience maybe know a little bit about the Baltic Sea at least, but we'll see. There is the next question, or are we taking that one later? Sorry, I'm a bit confused. No, we are taking that one later. Yeah, so you will get more questions. So be ready to answer more questions in a bit. So about questions, you can also ask questions to our speakers or to me or anything that you would like us to discuss here during the seminar. And to ask those questions, we prefer that you use the chat on the World Water Week website. This session's specific site on the World Water Week website. You can use that chat there to write your questions to our speakers, and we will try to at least ask a few of those when we come to the panel discussion in the end. But before that, we will start with our speakers, and you will get to listen to a few very interesting presentations, and we'll try to involve you also a little bit in between. So let's invite our first speaker here at the seminar, and that is on the topic of planetary boundaries, water and nutrients. And our speaker is Sarah Cornell from the Stockholm Resilience Center at Stockholm University. So Sarah, are you ready to share your presentation with us? I'll give you the floor.
I do hope so. Thank you, Maria. And here we go. And I'm going to clear up my screen a little bit. Okay, it's such a pleasure to be here at this session at the Stockholm Resilience Centre where I work. We've been working with the Planetary Boundaries framework for more than a decade. We work within an international scientific network, really working on the underpinning science, trying to understand the way the whole planet works. And we're constantly in dialogue with new kinds of actors now, about putting the framework into practice. And for me, that's one of the highlights of this session, thinking about how policy, business, and actually local communities too, use our understanding of global change science to inform decisions at the levels where people actually live and work. You may have seen this visualization before, or this kind of visualization before, and it needs a little bit of explanation. So I'll start there. Whoops, I've already gone to. The Planetary Boundaries framework brings together 9 biophysical processes of global environmental change, where human activities are changing the way that the planet functions. In the visualization, every one of the wedges is a biophysically framed environmental process. In that sense, the framework as a whole captures the main areas of Earth system change, and I'll explain a little bit what that is in a minute, on timescales of decades to centuries. And the other thing the framework does is to put these contemporary changes, human-caused changes, into the context of very long-term, very large-scale time frame. We use the Holocene, the past 10,000 years, as our baseline for change. The reason we focus on the Holocene is that for roughly 10 or 12,000 years, climate and the world's ecosystems have been really remarkably stable compared to the big glacial and interglacial swings of Earth history before that. Now, one of the assumptions in the framework is that stability, those stable conditions, are really what's played a large part in enabling everything that we regard as human societies functioning now. We rely on predictability, we rely on stability, and we rely on having resilient ecosystems that are adapted to particular climatic conditions. Now, the situation we face right now is that the further that our current human activities are pushing the system away from this safe operating space of a well-characterized, well-understood biophysical stability at the planet scale, we realize that the risks are rising. It's pushing us into less predictable conditions where we have less observational evidence of how the planet works. But also we know that risks rise when these conditions are pushed out of stability. We know from other experiences in Earth history that climatic and ecological changes can be larger scale, more abrupt, and obviously we're particularly concerned when those issues are irreversible, like extinctions. So that's an overview of the framework. I said I'd mention briefly that what an Earth system perspective is. The Planetary Boundaries framework is underpinned by Earth system science. That's a field of research where we're trying to understand and, where possible, quantify the relationships between climate, the physical environment, the thing we call natural resources in our more economic framed world, and of course the living world itself, the biosphere. It's the science of a living planet, quite honestly. And we're interested in understanding the interactions and the feedbacks between all of these different components, and specifically the way that they pan out across scales. Come on screen, I pushed the button, there we go. So just to summarize where we've reached right now, today's human-driven changes, we can compare them with the kinds of changes seen through Earth history. And we know that many of these changes, particularly the ones that are highlighted in the Planetary Boundaries framework, are bigger and faster and actually becoming more unpredictable. They're interacting pressures, and because of that, they're intensifying fast, and it's making it harder for us to make predictions and projections of what the consequences will be at a global scale. If we want sustainability, and this is a political and economic choice that the world faces right now, it entails bringing really reducing the pressures on all of these rising risks. At the same time, local action has global consequences. And of course, global changes also impact the Baltic Sea. For a very long time now, we know how important global changes are affecting the water quality and the ecosystems in the Baltic. We know about polar amplification of global warming. That means that temperatures in these higher latitudes are going to be accelerating faster under conditions of climate change than in other parts of the world. We know about transboundary air pollution. We know about the consequences for eutrophication as well. But what I really want to emphasize at this point, and I've just picked a few examples from the literature, not particularly from the topics we'll be discussing today, is really, even when we know about a particular problem in one of the wedge areas of the Planetary Boundaries framework, we still struggle to join up the picture to get a system story. So here's just one example. Nitrogen emissions from ship stacks really create a pulse of nutrient inputs to the Baltic Sea. That's the red in this picture. But the Planetary Boundaries framework reminds us that changing the nutrient inputs into one place is also part of the global nitrogen cycle. This is another picture, this time from the holistic assessment. A real challenge is that when we try to join all the dots, we end up with a big tangle of issues. And again, the Planetary Boundaries framework can help us to cluster these issues into different topic areas. We know that many of the pressures on the Baltic are already planetary priorities, reasons for global concern, where global policies are emerging rapidly. We also know that the human drivers are a bit of a tangle. We're dealing with landscapes and seascapes and different kinds of actors that are sometimes in conflict with each other. And of course, the region's social drivers. We are here in the Baltic, and this is an example just from the Nordic nations. A small geographic region actually has a global reach in terms of its economy. This is just looking at timber, paper, and forest products, where exports have biophysical consequences everywhere else around the world as well. So if I have one message for you today, it's that this regional is also part of the global. And then we come back to what to do with it. We have planet scale problems where biophysical changes play out through the living and the physical environment in really complex ways. And we have people scale challenges. Now, a lot of our work is about translating the Planetary Boundaries framework. And with Tina Helha and other colleagues, we see that we need a three-step process for this. Science can say a lot about the biophysical characteristics of the planet, and we see that as the first step. But global trade and the export markets I just mentioned have their own networks, their own webs, their own dynamics. And we need to look at those socioeconomic patterns as well. Often that's a different discipline for academic studies entirely, so we have a challenge there. But of course, economies, stuff, and money also have implications for equity and fairness all around the world. So when we talk about reducing planetary pressures, it's really not enough for me to sit as an academic talking about science. We have to have new kinds of dialogues that do a better job at translating between the material flows where we have data and measurement and science, and the money flows, where obviously there's also data and quantification, but really a completely different language. So in the Planetary Boundaries framework, I mentioned the Earth system, but I also want to say that the framework is a framework because it brings different systems together. The Earth system story is, as I've said, about linking the physical and climate system with the living part of the planet. That's the reason we describe climate change and biodiversity loss as core boundaries in the framework. And we have global policies for climate change and biodiversity loss. We have global goals, and increasingly we have global targets that can be translated to business action targets and practices as well. In a separate system, I often regard the natural resource system as really the place where the drivers of change come in. We look at natural resources like water and land. And one thing I didn't mention in the tangle picture that I showed before, is just how much what we do on land affects water, and the way that we use fresh water changes the possibilities for land, not just here in the region, but elsewhere in the world, again, connected through trade patterns. We have footprinting methods for a lot of these really quite fundamental natural resources. And then we have what I often call the jokers in the pack. Human activities, particularly our capacity to synthesize new chemical substances and to really transform inactive nutrient elements into very reactive nutrient elements. These are multipliers of the human impacts that we would see in different ecosystems at the local level. It means we see consequences spinning out in unpredictable ways around the world. We deal with extremely hazardous substances and, of course, the nutrient flows that lead to dead zones far away from the places where people are actually applying fertilizers in the first place. And we're in the situation where we know that we need to do a better job of making that link between the material activities of human societies, the biophysical impacts, and of course, the weird world of money and finance. There are lots of these initiatives out there, and so it goes without saying that we really need to work closely with the new conversations, the new impetus behind commitments to net zero for carbon and for more nature positive movement in this coming decade. there's also a lot of work trying to translate these global policies and targets into operational targets. For example, the work of the Science-Based Targets Network. And that's really where I want to end my contribution here and start the conversation flowing with just this one final message. We know for sure that reducing the biophysical pressures at the planetary level means dealing with money, tackling the way that money flows, not just looking at the natural environment and what we used to call natural resources. Thank you.
Thank you very much for
And
that.
now I can't stop share.
Yeah, you can. You managed to stop sharing now. Thank you very much, Sarah. I mean, let's say when we look at the Baltic Sea, I would claim that we have managed quite a lot of these point sources of emissions, and we have sort of picked the low-hanging fruits and solved the easy problem, so to say. But the ones that are still there, the emissions from agriculture, for example, or from the forestry sector, from some pollution also from ships and so on, it's much more complex problems than the one that we have sort of tackled so far. And that needs that we look at these issues more as a whole. And I think these planetary boundaries is a very good way of doing that. But the thing that needs to also connect are not only the money flows, but also the social aspect of life, so to say. So do you also work trying to get that more integrated into your planetary boundaries system, so to say?
That is also, I mean, you've hit a really important nail on the head. One really well-known way of trying to bring the social and the planetary biophysical aspects together is the donut economics approach developed by Kate Raworth. And there she uses the Sustainable Development Goals as a really clear baseline for the social foundation, just as we use biophysical change over long timescales for the environmental ceiling. Now that's a fantastic tool for exactly the everyday discussions that you just mentioned, the kind of the decisions that individual people or cities can make. But we still really lack an understanding about how this social dynamics play out. And it is an area for research for us at the Stockholm Resilience Centre and in many other places around the world too. One of my colleagues, Victor Gallas, and several others in the Sustainable Finance Initiative here at Stockholm University are really trying to do a better job of matching these webs of money flows and their biophysical consequences. So it's an exciting area to be working in.
Yeah, I can imagine. I can really imagine. And everyone in the audience who is interested in knowing more about the Stockholm Resilience Center, I'm sure you can find a lot of information on their website. So thanks a lot, Sarah, for this. We will get back to you also in the panel discussion a little bit later. So now we are supposed to get back to the Menti, and you will answer a new question. The question is, what sea, lake, or river are you working to protect from pollution? Or if you are not specifically working in this area, you can at least write the sea, lake, or river that is closest to your heart. So let's go again to Menti, and I think you can use the same link, or you can use the same link as last time. It's still in the chat, so I will try to write here myself, just a good example, and then we will see the result on the screen. Please give us your best water area. So not very surprisingly, some people write the Baltic Sea, Stockholm Archipelago, Vikan, Xingu, or however that is pronounced, the bottom sea. Just wait a few more seconds to see if something else turns up. Stora Rängen in Östergötland. Yes, it seems that we have people mostly from the Baltic Sea area or Sweden, but also some others. And yes, thanks a lot for that. You can still add if you have something, or we will just get back also to talk a little bit more about these questions, maybe not so much exactly where you come from, but we will have a few more questions later on also, where we will get some input to our panel discussion. But our next topic here is sustainable blue economy and financial flows, which is a very good follow-up to what we talked with Sarah about just now, about how to sort of push the money flows or the investments to instead of maybe causing environmental problems for the Baltic Sea, to get them to flow in a more positive direction. And we will invite Johanna Fox back to talk about this. And she is from WWF and the Baltic Ecoregion, and she will tell us also a little bit more what that is. So the floor is yours, Johanna.
Thank you, Maria. All right, then it's my turn to try and share the screen. There. And you see I'm just like Maria said, I'm going to talk about these money flows in the Baltic region and whether they are helping to steer us towards a sustainable blue economy in our Baltic or not. And just if I can ask Maria here, just that you still see my screen would be good.
We see your screen, and it's in full screen mode. And
fantastic.
Hopefully you see it too.
All right, good. So just before I start, a little bit on the WWF Baltic Ecoregion Programme that I'm the director for. And this program is a pan-Baltic program of national WWF offices and partner organizations across the whole Baltic. In all 9 countries are we present. And we work on environmental policies related to landscape, to seascape, and also sustainable finance. And our goal is obviously we want to see a healthy Baltic Sea. So before we start going into talking about the economy in the Baltic, or the blue economy in the Baltic, let's just look at what is a blue economy or an ocean economy. And that is, the blue economy is value created and supported by our oceans, seas, and coasts across the globe. And it is estimated to be worth at least $24 trillion. And this is now, whereas it is expected to increase, to double in size by 2030. Now, the oceans and money flowing into sectors, maritime sectors and sectors linked to the ocean, is something like a new frontier. There's been this research showing that we have now a blue acceleration, that there is more increase in economic activities linked to the oceans. But this is obviously putting a lot of pressure on our ecosystems, our ocean ecosystems and coastal ecosystems, because economic activities often have a pressure. They will have an impact, most likely. And this growth that we're seeing can be an endless potential to serve as engine for jobs, development of various sectors, countries and regions. But with putting extra stresses on our resources, it can't be done unsustainably. Some of our ecosystems perhaps even need to be restored before we put more economic pressure onto them, without undermining our, like Sarah was talking about, staying within our planetary boundaries, but also not undermining our material flows, the actual, what we get out of our oceans. So what does it look like in the Baltic? Do we see the same trends here? And yes, we do. The Baltic, like I was talking about earlier, is a crowded sea. I think it's home 15% of all seaborne freight passes the Baltic, and that is 50% of the global seaborne freight. And we see an increase in shipping, we see an increase in tourism, but we also see increases in protected areas, renewable energy, and oil and gas extraction. So there's a lot of things that are happening in a very small sea. And from WWF side, we wanted to look at what will it look like from 2010 to 2020 to 2030 in the various sectors around the Baltic Sea. And we found out that the future growth, predicted growth, lies within renewable energy, tourism, and shipping. But this was something we predicted a few years back. And we are very much looking into whether the Baltic economy is a sustainable one or not. We've been looking at the future trends, and now we've been looking more into where the finance is going into the Baltic, which I will talk about a little bit more now. But in all of this, with our resources, a lot of pressure onto our marine ecosystems, if we're going to see this type of economic growth in our seas, in our Baltic Sea, it has to be done sustainably. And for that, at WWF, we talk about something that's called a sustainable blue economy. And we have principles for this, where those principles say that it is this definition is a scientifically based one. It looks at an economy that restores, protects, and maintains the biodiversity, productivity, and resilience and core functions of our ecosystems. And it's based on clean technology, such as renewable energy and circular material flow. And it provides social and economic benefits, both for current and future generations. And it contributes to food security, poverty eradication, livelihoods, income, employment, etc., etc. And it also starts from understanding that no economy can sustain itself when its natural resource base is systematically being degraded. So we really need to work on having an economy that also contributes to restoring our ecosystems. And that is particularly pertinent for the Baltic, with the state that it is in. Now, is our economy in the Baltic really steering towards a sustainable blue economy? Is finance steering towards a sustainable blue economy? And this is something that we in the WWF Baltic Ecoregion Programme wanted to find out. And we know that there's an immense value in what the oceans provide us and in what the Baltic provides us. But is the financial flows in the Baltic, and this is looking at the seascape, not what's happening on land, but actually more on the maritime sectors, such as fishing, shipping, and so renewable energies, oil and gas extraction in the seascape. And this study that I'm going to present some of the findings is a report that's coming out later this autumn. So this is kind of fresh off the press. It's a sneak peek into what the report will say. And it's the first study of its kind that's solely focusing on the Baltic seascape. And we really find that it's important to map the key actors in the finance space and what they are financing, and examine both if there are environmental and social impacts from these financial flows. And this is what I'm going to talk about now. So the Baltic economy, we found, it's quite a large blue economy. The total turnover is 1.7 trillion euros per year. And the gross added value, which is a production metric, is at 263.5 billion euros. Now, that is 1.5 times bigger than the total EU agricultural sector. So there's a lot of money and value in this economy that we have here around the Baltic. And if we break down into the sectors that are the biggest ones in the Baltic economy, we see that the renewable energy sector is large, but also the extraction sector, which is all the yellow bars that you see on this graph here. And something to note is that this study was done pre the pandemic and pre the situation we have now, the geopolitical situation. So these numbers might be something different if we take a snapshot today. So it's a big economy, and it's also a growing one, and something that, if you remember the slide I showed you earlier, the predicted growth in the Baltic economy, we see that this is true. We do see an increase in renewable offshore wind, but also in tourism in the Baltic Sea. Something that struck us from the WWF is that the biggest increase in annual growth per sector, that is of the fossil fuel extraction. And this is a clear signal that this economy is not a sustainable blue economy. Finance is currently not steering towards a sustainable blue economy. If we go into a little bit, I'll give this as a snapshot, the financial flows that we looked at. And so in the Baltic blue economy, new debt accounts for 93% of all flows. And here we have banks and institutional loans that are the most prominent ones. What are the financial actors? Again, banks and institutional loan providers are the largest debt issuers. And we also have traditional asset managers that are the largest holders. In terms of the biggest sectors, as I said before, we have the extraction and trade, as well as the renewable energy generation. So looking at this picture with all these various actors and the different sectors, how could we work towards steering away from unsustainable practices? Financial actors such as banks could be issuing criteria or demands onto the people, onto the sectors that they are investing in. For example, if they're investing in offshore renewable energy, perhaps looking at criteria for best practice use. Similarly, when it comes to the fishing sector, if they are to get a loan for a boat or their business, perhaps there should be criteria looking at how can we steer away from trawling that is having a big impact on our Baltic Sea, but to more sustainable fishing practices. And that is a way that financial actors can be part of this and can steer the finance to better solutions. And also something like us as consumers or shareholders in this case start asking about where our money is going. Where is my pension scheme being invested? Is my pension scheme being invested into, say, fossil fuel extraction in the Baltic or not? But another one of our questions was to look at the environmental, social impact of these financial flows, and to properly assess whether they support or hinder a sustainable blue economy. And we looked at 21 economic sectors, and looking at this, it's it's not steering towards a sustainable blue economy. Nearly 79% of the total debt in the Baltic Sea seascape has some sort of negative environmental or social impact. So clearly finance currently is not playing the role that it could be. Only 6% of the total debt are within sectors that have a neutral or a positive impact on environmental and social aspects. So that is quite sad to see, something we from our side. So a couple of key takeaways that I would like you to think about now before we go into hearing more and into the discussion is that the Baltic blue economy is a big economy and it's growing. However, we do see a growth in sectors that are not sustainable. We still see a growth in fossil fuel extraction. Like I said before, 79% is held by sectors with a weak or strong negative impact on environmental and social aspects. Debt is the key financial mechanism that can be leveraged to have a positive impact. And financial actors can play a role towards a sustainable economy, but currently they're not quite doing that in the Baltic. And we do need tools and mechanisms to make it more beneficial to invest in sustainable practices and to move away from harmful environmental and social impacts. Tools and mechanisms are there, but they're not quite being used fully at the moment. And like I said, these results are hot off the press, and this is something that we in the WWF will be using in our work moving forward. And any detailed questions, I really would like to urge you to contact my colleague Valerie de Liedekerke, who is the one who's been spearheading this report. Thank you for listening.
And thank you, Johanna. It was super interesting to hear how we could steer the financial flows in a better way to reduce the negative impacts on the Baltic Sea. And when will this report be presented to the general public, so to say?
To the general public, so to say. It will be sometime just this autumn. The date hasn't quite been set yet. It is. It's soon to be finalized. It's on the layout side, so maybe in a month or 2 months time.
So will you also then start cooperations maybe with the financial actors to try to I don't know, but maybe take some specific action related to the Baltics? Do you see any hope of that?
Yes, we do. I mean, we've already started. That's a work that's already being done by the Baltic Ecoregion Programme to work with financial actors. Even in drafting this report, was a constant dialogue with banks, pension providers, and so on. So we're having that dialogue currently. What we do hope is with this picture, and especially now, looking in that we'll see in the Baltic an increase in renewable energy. And if we can come and show that, well, combining our knowledge in terms of how finance can steer towards sustainable solutions with concrete suggestions on guidelines for the best offshore renewables that can even have a positive impact on nature rather than just a negative one, and to show that to loan providers, to financial, to investors. And it might be a way of increasing their awareness of steering towards more sustainable solutions than others. So that's what we're hoping for.
Yeah, yes. Good luck with that.
Thank
We
you.
will come back to you as well in the panel discussion in just a short while. Thanks a lot so far, Johanna. And we will now move on to another Menti question. And I am not sure, maybe this one will be influenced by, by the presentation that you just heard. It's about who has the greatest responsibilities to steer finance towards a sustainable blue economy in the Baltics. And you can still see the link in the chat, just a little bit up. You will see where you can click, and then you will get into the question at Menti. Let's see who you think has the main responsibility. Seems like governments are in the spotlight here. And then we have the industry also, and that's of course, I know these questions are super difficult because you always think that, yeah, but it's a little bit of all of them. Of course it is. And everyone can do their part and needs to do their part. I used to be a politician myself, and it's a great responsibility, of course, but it's also the fact that without the support from general public and the industry, it's very difficult to make any kind of long-term change, because everything will be questioned. So, but it seems at least that, in your opinion, the governments are the ones who are the main actors responsible to steer the finance towards the sustainable blue economy in the Baltics. Let's hope that the decision makers in the governments and parliaments agree with that as well. So thanks a lot for that input. We will maybe bring that up later in the panel discussion. Now we will move on to our third and last speaker before the panel. And this time we will, I mean, I mentioned in the beginning that we need these new perspectives to inspire this continuous work for the health of the Baltic Sea. And we got already the perspective from the sort of global planetary boundaries and how we can use that to increase the understanding and action related to the Baltic Sea. And now the blue economy perspective and how the financial flows could be used to reduce a negative impact and increase positive impact. What we will do now is we will listen to examples from more of the local action and partnership and how those can be beneficial for the sustainability of the Baltic. So we move from the sort of global level to the more concrete action on the local side. And the person who will tell us more about this is Mats Johansson, who works with the Baltic Stewardship Initiative. So I will give the floor to you, Mats. Are you there and are you ready?
Yes, thank you very much. So I will try to make an example on more on a local or a regional level of a project initiative addressing the pressures on the Baltic Sea. So I will share my screen and hopefully you will see it now. The Baltic Stewardship Initiative is a Swedish program or project that I'm leading, and it's funded by grants from the European Union going through the Swedish Agriculture Agency, and it runs for approximately 3 years. And it's a new way, or maybe even an innovative way of tackling the pressures on the Baltic Sea regarding to nutrients and eutrophication. And this is adding to the work that has been going on for decades in Sweden and in all the Baltic countries, trying to save the Baltic Sea. So I will talk a little bit about this initiative and what we do and what we plan to do. Just connecting to what Johanna stated and what Maria, you also said, talking about we've been working with the eutrophication and the nutrient challenge for many years, and we still haven't solved it. Still, 97% of the Baltic Sea is affected by eutrophication, and we do see algae blooms, lack of oxygens, and dead seabeds. Just exemplifying this pressure, and we do have an excess input of nitrogen and phosphorus, and we need to reduce this further, and we know this, and we have been working with this within the HELCOM and the Baltic Sea Action Plan, etc., for many years. Still, we really don't see this going in a positive direction. Well, at least not that we could see in a few years' time. And where does the problem come from? Yeah, it's not in the sea, it's from land. As I've also been pointing out earlier, we have linear nutrient flows through our society and our food production systems, and agriculture is now the largest contributors to the emissions of eutrophication, and that is phosphorus and nitrogen. And we do need to reduce the emissions and take actions on land, in the landscape and the water in the landscape, not only in the Baltic Sea that's been discussed. And but this is difficult, and we want to see if we could address this question from a new perspective. And the new perspective and the idea that's been this initiative is based on is the idea of stewardships. And the WWF in Sweden and internationally have for many years been working with water stewardship, and it's a method for gathering actors around a common resource. So we have lots of lessons learned from the water resource, and now we're talking about the Baltic Sea and the nutrient challenge. And this includes a lot of steps, where, as you can see in the picture, about water awareness, knowledge of the impact that the companies and the actors do, and we need internal action within all actors, and then we add collective actions, and then influencing the governance, addressing policy and politicians and governments. So that's a lot of things that I will not go into detail. There are a lot of seminars in the World Water Week regarding water stewardships in different aspects. So this Baltic Stewardship Initiative is based on involving all the actors along the food chain in Sweden, for starters. And we have representation for consumer organizations, we have food producers, food retailers, we also have the farmers on board, and we also have municipal actors and also waste and wastewater actors that are private companies. So this is very important, bringing, not only working with one part of the system or one type of actors, which we normally do in our silo thinking society. So, and we also have addressed and reached out to and managed to get on board a lot of companies and organizations that really want to make a real change. And what they have promised to do is to identify, share, and disseminating solutions to increase their and others' knowledge, and also to influence public governance. And we have quite bold goals or visions for this process that just started a few years ago. And the idea or the vision is that we really want a viable countryside in the countries around the Baltic Sea, and a healthy Baltic Sea. And we believe that this is possible to reach. And the long-term goal is that the agriculture around the Baltic Sea has minimized. We cannot go to zero, but we want to minimize the nutrient leakage by 2045. So we have a quite long perspective, and then we have a project goal for the 3 to 4 year long project, and that is to start getting an active cluster together that together works for increased competitiveness for the farmers, and that is we want to lift the farmers that minimize the nutrient leakage. And also the farmers that increase the recirculation of plant nutrients, which is very, very important as well, as we see this is as being a scarce resource and a very important, more and more expensive resource. So this is really what we are working on, and what I will present now. A little bit about the project. Is that we do have committed partners on national level that are very strong. We have the Farmers Association, that's LRF of Sweden. We have Lantmännen, which is the biggest food company that are both selling food and also selling commodities, nutrients, etc., fodder to farmers. We have Coop, which is one of the major food retailers in Sweden, and then us at WWF Sweden. So this is where we have anchored the project. And then we have a very active network that have been established since 2020 when the project was started. And we have a lot of different activities. And with a digital platform that's being developed, we have meetings, reports, and developing tools. I will speak a little bit about that, and open seminars, and that has mainly been webinars the last years. And we also have a scientific reference group connected to the project. So what have we done? The first 2 years, we have establishing and developing this active network, which is kind of unique. We have small farmers, we have big large farmers, we have organic farmers and conventional farmers. We have people working in municipalities, working to advise and to get actions done on the local level. We have the food companies, and we have the food retailers, and we also have a lot of public actors. So this is an active network that has been established and been started working only even though we have had the COVID pandemic, etc., which is very nice now when the society opens up and we can start meeting together. We have been working a lot with increasing the knowledge, and that has been based on the questions or the knowledge gaps that the network have identified. And we have had a lot of dialogue meetings. Most of the results are in Swedish, but there are some other in English as well. We have also started working groups on themes that the network have decided on being extra and more important than others. And one is we have defined it local solutions for agriculture. And the idea is to find ways to reach out to farmers, not only the 5 to 10 farmers that are involved in the network, but also how to reach out with knowledge and have discussion and learn from farmers. That's one working group that have come up with a lot of activities. We have had a very active group that's been working mainly on national level with circular nutrient flows. And this ended up with, in January, policy message backed up by the network, and a lot of different actors was presented to the Swedish Parliament and the government, Swedish government. And we had one group connecting to what we've been discussing now, the money flows, the financial markets, and the pressures that we have called a market reward to farmers. And that's where we have started a development of a tool that will reward farmers that reduce the nutrient leakage. So what are we doing right now, and what will we do for the rest of the project that is through 2023? We will have started another round of webinar series, and most of them are in Swedish, but we will have on the 25th of October, there will be a webinar in English, reaching out to an audience all around the Baltic Sea. There will be on the eutrophication and also other aspects of the Baltic Sea connected to agriculture. We have started a campaign, and then we are now making films that will be presented maybe in October, with good examples of farmers that are working with this to reduce the nutrient leakage. And maybe the most important part that we will work with is now that we are developing, and we hope this autumn that we will test a new tool in cooperation with retailers and food companies that will reward farmers. And so if the farmer show could prove that they have done a number of activities that reduce nutrient leakage, the companies higher up in the food value chain will then reward them financially or in some other way. This is very interesting, but I cannot tell the details at this very moment, but this will be a result this year. And thus we will keep on working, addressing the need of new policy to secure future nutrient supply, and we will have networks meetings. And eventually, in the end of the project, we will develop a vision and a roadmap for the next steps. So we only see this project as the base, the starting point, establishing the network, and then moving on. So wrapping this up, I say that the Baltic Stewardship Initiative, it's a new way of addressing the nutrient challenge. And the nutrient challenge consists of both the eutrophication aspect that we've been discussing, but also the circularity of nutrients that we do need from a sustainability perspective. And we have created this partnership along the value chain for food production that's, I would say, is rather unique. Brings together a lot of actors with a lot of interest and knowledge, and also ability to act. We are about to develop the mechanisms that reward farmers. That is really interacting with the money flows. That's both Johanna and Sarah have highlighted. But to do this, we do need to get everybody on board. We cannot only work with the farmers or with the retailers or with the consumers. We need to work all along the value chain. And then finally, the idea of eutrophication is best solved if we put the nutrients back in the right place, that is on farmland. And this way we could replace the fossil-based fertilizers that we mainly use in agriculture now. We can increase the resilience of the systems and the robustness, also on a company or a farmer's level. And if we do this, we also reduce the eutrophication of the Baltic Sea. So that's where I will end. Please feel free to contact me and in different way. And if you, we do have some English information, but mostly in Swedish on our website. Thank you for giving me the time to present this.
Thank you, Mats. Great. It's very interesting to hear that you are doing these concrete actions together with farmers. But I was thinking that, I mean, there are a lot of political steering documents. There are also a lot of initiatives, like from a top-down perspective. Shouldn't these things just happen automatically when, you know, you give the directions from the governments, for example, or from the EU Commission or wherever? Why do we need this type of initiative?
Well, in the best of worlds, we give the governance goals. That's we say we want to reach this goal, or we want to move in this direction, and then everybody listens and follows. But if you earn more money or save money by doing something unsustainable, most actors will earn more money. So if we don't go in, interact, and getting so that everybody along this value chain benefits from combating eutrophication or increasing the circularity of nutrients, we will never, ever reach this nutrient challenge, because we will not go towards a plan economy or rules that really interacts with all farmers, saying you cannot, you must use this kind of fertilizer, or you must do these actions. So going the market way is really needed to complement this top-down approach that we see both on EU level, on Baltic level, and on national and national regional level. And I just want to add that everybody that I meet in the work now wants to save the Baltic. They
Even
want
the farmers.
Yeah, the farmer wants to reduce the eutrophication. They see the nutrient as a resource, and now a more and more valuable resource as the fertilizer prices go up. So everybody wants, but then it's the economic reality. The farmer is an economic man, as you say, and therefore we need new ways of working, and this is one approach.
Yeah, I mean, of course, if you are a farmer, you need to get your economy going as well. It's not, you cannot only care about the nutrients, of course, but yeah, we have seen a lot of protests from farmers against political decisions to try to force them into this. So maybe you can be a bridge builder, so to say, between the top-down perspective and the farmer's perspective, so that you can, through this project, maybe inspire more of concrete action.
And we do have the farmers and the Swedish farmers organizations on board, and we have them active in our network. So it's wrong to say that they don't want. Maybe they, in many situations, can't.
So what about using this as a good example for other regions in the world, maybe even not only for other parts of the Baltic?
Yeah, well, first we take Manhattan, but well, we have started this as a Swedish project with this first step. We are discussing and about to, together with Johanna Fox and the Baltic Ecoregion Programme and actors around the Baltic Sea, we will start discussing it. Could this be done or in some way inspire other countries, actors, organizations around the Baltic Sea? And I hope before I get too old, we will see nutrient stewardships or stewardships along on this issue in other parts of the world, in other well, big like the Mekong Delta or other places where we do have extreme problems with eutrophication. Well, one step at a time.
Yeah, thanks a lot. We will get back to you in just a short while in the panel discussion. First, we will take another Menti question. So please, everyone, go to the chat and click the link for the menti.com or just go to the webpage menti.com and use the code you see on the screen. And then you get to answer a question about how much of a price increase you would accept for a bread that was produced in a Baltic friendly way. Me myself, I eat mostly, Finnish rye bread. I don't know how much of an impact on the Baltic that has. Probably a bit, since it's produced from agricultural land around the Baltics. But you can always pay a little bit more for Finnish rye bread because that's the best in the world. And if you didn't eat it, then I can warmly recommend that you buy one and then you use it in the toaster and then you eat it with butter or cheese or whatever you prefer. So it seems that people would be willing to pay up to 5 kronor more for a loaf of bread that was produced in a Baltic friendly way. And of course, it's easy if it's only the bread, but then if it's everything else as well, you would have to pay more for, then maybe it wouldn't be possible to pay as much. But it's interesting to see, and we do know from former surveys that people around the Baltic are actually ready to spend money on saving the Baltic. They think it has a economic value for them to have a healthy Baltic Sea, and they would be actually prepared to pay even more than what is invested in protecting the Baltic every year. So there is generally also a willingness from people who live around the coast of the Baltics to pay for the protection of the Baltic Sea. So that's at least something that's positive for the future. Thanks a lot for your input on this. And what we will do now is that we will move on to the panel discussion, and then I invite all our 3 speakers to turn on their microphones again. And if you chose the speaker mode, then maybe you would like to choose the gallery mode so that then possibly you could see all the speakers at the same time here. And I want to start to ask you to comment on these Menti questions that we had. The first one for Johanna, I would like you to comment on the responsibility to steer the financial flows towards a sustainable blue economy. We saw that the audience thinks that it's the governments who has the main responsibility to do that. What do you say, Johanna?
Well, my response to that is I understand that it's many people think it is with governments, and governments have a very important role to play, or policymakers, but we all have a role to play, just like you were saying, Maria, when the question was up. Everyone can play a role in this, and everyone needs to see their role in steering finance towards more sustainable solutions. And I mean, governments, we have this fossil fuels and the extraction in the Baltic. Policies can be put in place to make that less profitable, or even not granting new extraction potentials. But other financial actors can also steer away investments from that type of activities. And as a consumer or shareholder, whether it is a government or me as an individual, can start asking these questions. Where is my money going? To put pressure that way.
And we have seen it happen a bit when it comes to climate change. So I think that's hopeful, at least. Sarah, Johanna says that everyone can play their part in this. What would you say, what's the role of the scientists in sort of pushing the financial sector in the right direction when it comes to this? Could you do something to influence these discussions?
I think one of the first things for scientists to do is to actually, I described it as a different language. And I think it's very easy for us to think that because we quantify things, it should be easy to just have one set of numbers in one hand that automatically get plugged into an algorithm and give us a different set of numbers for targets and budgets and everything else. And that is not at all how it works. I think as a community, scientists have also kind of built a mental story for ourselves that we're outside looking in this world. And there's a lot of challenge in actually grabbing hold of the activist, or rather even actor word. We're observers and meticulous documenters of this whole mess. And to actually admit our own part is actually quite challenging. So I think there's we must find better ways of transmitting our knowledge into this really complicated social collective issue for responsibility. And at the same time, we kind of need to do better at, and this is at being humble about our role in it as well. I've got a million more things to say, but I'll hand over for now.
Yeah, thank you. But I do believe that sometimes scientists are a bit afraid of engaging in the public discussion. That doesn't go for you at the Stockholm Resilience Center, of course, but in general, I would say, at least in Sweden, it's the case that scientists, they keep a little bit to themselves and engage with each other a lot, but maybe not with sort of the public discussion or the financial actors, or not even always the politicians. So I think there is room for development and improvement on that side. Mats, do you want to comment on the question of how much people are prepared to pay more for a loaf of bread? Of course, that depends also on the economic situation of the person in question. And how much more expensive would it be?
Maybe we have a very biased audience here that have a very high willingness to pay. But I just want to say that if we could have, now we are talking about Swedish crowns here, but maybe we could have 10 cents if we talk about European, or a few, or just ören is what we call it, small amounts of money per loaf of bread. And this money would go directly through the system down to the farmer. That would make a huge difference. So it's not about increasing, having 5 crowns or 50 cents going down the value chain. It's about cents. And if we could get these mechanisms in place, we have seen that in small local examples, this will make a real difference for the possibility for the farmers to take actions on local level to decrease the emissions of nutrients, and also to recirculate the nutrients. So that's one idea. The other idea is that if this nutrient that we now see as a pollution, as a waste, going out in the streams and into the Baltic causing problems, if that is seen as a value, and we take that and we recirculate that on the farm or within a watershed or within the country back into food production, and that is valued, and the farmer and the others could benefit from that, then we will get this system also running, getting a new driver that we haven't seen the last 20 or 30 years when trying to combat eutrophication. So it will not be that expensive for the consumer, I believe. We just need to get this tool or mechanisms in place.
Yes, now we get to look a little bit at the questions from the audience. And if someone in the audience didn't hear this in the beginning, we advise you to ask your questions in the chat on the World Water Week website for this session. So there is a chat, and you can post your questions in there. We have received actually a few questions here. One of the question is to Johanna about the blue economy. Why is it expected to double in that short time frame? What is driving this growth?
Well, there's, as the way I understand it, it's not that much policy incentive. It's just a new frontier, and it's probably a bit linked with we are depleting our resources on land, and now we're looking to the oceans to increase economic activity. So a combination of things, but it's not driven so much by policy incentives. However, policy is coming on board, and in the EU we see a strategy for a blue economy and to drive the new frontier in terms of creating economic growth. It's a constant drive for economic growth, and the oceans is the new one where we see that's happening.
We also got the question from the same person. It's Rosemarie Herrero, and she asks if it's necessary with regulations to make banks factor in sustainability when giving loans. It's quite a broad question, and we have some, soft tools like the EU taxonomy coming up and so on. But do you see any other tools that could be used to sort of push the banks in this direction? Sarah or Johanna?
Yeah, I mean, from our side, we think that there are mechanisms out there like the UN Sustainable Blue Economy Finance Principles, and that's under their program for financial initiatives. And by making them, for instance, mandatory to follow, because these are principles that would steer finance towards more sustainable practices, and within what I was talking about a sustainable blue economy. How that could be done, that's beyond my level of expertise, to be honest. But that is one way of actually making these things mandatory, and also making it mandatory to report on ESGs, or to report to disclose the potential impact on nature, and in that way providing more information for the shareholders. So that's another way where it could be done. But this could also be done voluntary by banks and by financial actors.
Yeah, they don't have to wait for regulations.
No, because that takes time.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. We have a question.
Can I jump in on that?
Yeah, please, Sarah. Yes.
When the Planetary Boundaries framework first came out, a professor called Martin Heyer said, "This is great, but there's nobody in the cockpit of planet Earth." And that's really the conversation that we've had here this morning. There are many actors acting all at the same time. And it's almost like they're all pushing buttons and then wondering why this thing isn't going in the direction that we want it to do. I mean, I agree fully with the Menti thing that, governments must play a role. That's their job. It's not the job of banks to, we have different roles and functions in this complicated ecosystem of social actors. I'm interested in asset managers, the kind of, the people who are also involved in this process, because they seem to be responding to the social pressures in a way that actually our governments often aren't, and that certainly the banks themselves aren't, or, kind of normal, the things that me as a scientist thinks of as a bank. But we do need to sort of be exploring which kind of organisms in this ecosystem of finance and sustainability are the ones that are at the moment pushing these buttons in the direction that we want. Because there's always an awful lot of counter pressures, people wanting to keep the status quo as well. So yeah, regulations really matter, but we also need to look at people that are going a bit beyond regulations as well.
Thanks a lot, Sarah. And we also had a question about the global policies for biodiversity, if those could possibly, help steering in this direction. I mean, there is no one in the cockpit for planet Earth, that's correct, but there are a few, global initiatives, at least on the policy side. Do you have any comment on that?
Well, I could just come in. We have been discussed that a lot within the network and the idea and how we talk about eutrophication. It's been I did it today. The same had the same mistake, saying this is 97%, making all the tons and figures, etc. But it's really about biodiversity. The eutrophication kills the living life in the Baltic Sea and in our waters.
Yeah.
And maybe we should start talking about that more than about the Baltic Sea Action Plan calculated targets.
Now it's time to sort of sum up this seminar, and maybe if you have just a super short last comment. Mats, do you want to start?
Well, I would say stewardships cooperation is the way to go. That way we could touch the money flows. And I just want to add that we do need to develop scientific-based targets for water and eutrophication.
Thanks a lot. And Sarah?
I agree fully with Mats, because when we take actions that we know are sort of pushing in the same direction, that means that what we do in the region can actually change the whole system right at the global level too, and also be a demonstrator case about what it means to be taking this living planet perspective on the large scale and long term, because that's what a sustainable economy needs.
Thanks a lot. And Johanna?
Yeah, I'd also like to touch upon that with the last question, the new targets for biodiversity. I think it's really important that we get very strong and strong targets, because we see in the climate part we have the shift towards net zero, and finance, businesses, governments are aligning. Now we need something like that for nature, and hopefully that, like Sarah was saying, from the global it can trickle down to more of the regional and local.
Thanks a lot. We have been trying to cover here both the sort of global level and the economical flows, and then also down to the local initiatives. We received a few questions that we didn't have time to discuss. One of them was if the Baltic Stewardship Initiative will expand to other parts of the Baltic. I think we touched upon that at least, and it's good to see that there is an interest also from other side of the Baltic Sea to from Poland in this case, that these initiatives would also sort of spread. So let's hope that the Baltics can be a good example for maybe the rest of the world, and you can inspire others and they can inspire our work in the Baltic Sea, of course. And I want to thank everyone in the audience and the organizers, and definitely most of all you three speakers for your contributions today. And I hope that you will join also the next seminar on the Baltics, which will start in, I think, 10 minutes. I will be moderating that one as well, so look forward to seeing you there again. Thanks a lot, and bye for now.
Thank you.